see me next week? So I think that's about everything. Oh. Congratulations on your nomination. Hardy har har. On that note, I do love Baze, okay? Like, I just think it's weird that he does that. Like, based on everything about his persona. But I love him, and I hope he knows that. I want to say a few words about my friend Eric Gilliland, who passed away this week. Eric Gilliland was a wonderful friend and a great comedy writer, and he worked for a great many shows over the years, and he passed away earlier this week after a long fight with cancer. And he touched so many lives, especially people who work in this business. And the story I'd like to tell about him is that the first time I met him, I was in college. And I went to Northwestern, and he had gone to Northwestern a decade earlier. And my improv troupe, our senior year, went out to Los Angeles, and we did a couple of improv shows, and we thought we were all gonna get jobs, and of course, that's not what happens. But Eric Gilliland, because he'd been in the same improv troupe, reached out, and he took us all out to dinner. And he said before we came, everybody can bring me one piece of writing, and I'll read your writing, and I'll give you a critique. So I brought something. It was very exciting for me to have somebody who worked in professional television look at my script, and he read it, and then he called me after I got back to Chicago, and he said, I was so excited to hear what he thought, and all he said was, "It's great, write more." And that is ultimately, I think, the best advice you can give to young writers, is to tell them to write more. And I was very lucky as well, because all the people in his life, one of them reached out and said, he took a turn for the worse recently. And I wrote him an email and told him how sorry I was to hear that. And he wrote back the way he always does, with a very funny email, and about how he's keeping his hopes up. And I would just say that, like, the two things that I was thinking about, based on how lucky I was to know Eric, is write more. And if you only write one thing, write an email to somebody and tell them that you love them. We talked about putting chains on your tires during a Minnesota winter. I was told chains on tires are not legal in Minnesota. Have you tried poppers? We mentioned the beluga whale, who had been trained to be a Russian spy, was found dead. We made a joke about how it had been pushed out a window. Someone wrote pushing someone out a window is called defenestration. Bitch, I've been knowing that. But the whale that we joked got pushed out a window had actually been shot multiple times. This is true. The actual true story is almost weirder than the joke we wrote. They don't know who killed the whale, but there was a report of a man leaving the scene who could be heard yelling, "Vaccines aren't real!" Sam Waterston. So, Shoemaker obviously has rage issues. And we've established that. And one of the ways we've decided to deal with it is we've got him a small bonsai tree, and he keeps it over there on his desk. And whenever he feels one of his fits coming on, he'll just sort of clip and prune it, and that, like, brings him back to his center. And it's been very effective. Because the problem is, when he blows his top, it's so distracting for me and the audience. The amount of editing we have to do in shows where it's just like cutting out his screaming and yelling. And it doesn't take much to do it. And so for us, we're just like, thank God for the bonsai tree. Like that's, everybody here, you know, if you hear anything in the hallway, it's always like, is the bonsai tree? Is there anything? Yeah. Anyway, I'm doing corrections last week, and I can see in my periphery, he's got it right at the edge of his desk, his bonsai tree. And it's like tilting. And so I'm trying to like find a way to let Lederman know to do something. Because if that bonsai tree hits the ground, everything's over, right? And so I'm trying to think, like, what's a way to, like, in the moment, without, you know, distracting the audience who's enjoying corrections, like, to let Lederman know that, you know, this little bonsai tree is about to fall over. So I said timber. I know how to pronounce timbre. According to somebody wrote this in, according to the most recent canon, Carmen Sandiego's dad is not a deadbeat dad. He was assassinated when she was a baby. So that canon's taken a turn. Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego's dad? Don't ask. The last Jackal comment was hurtful, but this is maybe my favorite Jackal comment ever. It's an exchange between two jackals. It's a jackal making a comment and then the first reply. And it may be my favorite ever. Here's the first comment. English professor by day, jackal by night, here who will not deign to address Trump's incoherent ramblings, but who will say the deep-cut literary allusions that are prevalent in a closer look in corrections indicate that at least a few members of Seth's team were English majors, and I'm so proud of them and impressed by the cleverness of the writing. Here's the reply. Kind of a run-on sentence, but sure. Couple of comments this week. First one is in reference to Mindy Kaling's movie Late Night. I made a cameo in that film. Emma Thompson, Mindy Kaling. I just watched the movie Late Night, 2019, last night. Your cameo at the end. It's been a rough 5 years. Robert Kennedy was in Animal Flubs, Robert F. Kennedy. And we talked about the bear carcass that was in his van. There's also a story his daughter told about a time that a whale washed up on a beach and RFK sawed off the whale's head and put the whale's head in the van and drove home with the whale's head. And I think it goes without saying at this point, not that you need another reason, if RFK asks you to get in his van, don't. Things like an abattoir. That story, his daughter told that story in a magazine profile years ago. The story actually happened in 1994, but it just resurfaced. You know what's not going to resurface? That headless whale. Bass. I was like, why? I don't know why I try yours. Well, I do know why. I try him because he writes them down, he writes little notes, and he slides it under my door. And they're always signed, love ya. Just like, this one made me giggle, give it a try, love ya, Bays. And it's just... Is that appropriate in a workplace? Another thing about Animal Flubs, I sang a line as RFK Jr. and everybody said I didn't sound like him. It's a tricky one, right? It's a tricky one because, you know, he has a condition, spasmodic dysphoria. Hopefully I said that right. And, you know, so I guess it's a little on the line. I don't know if it would be worth doing, you know. You know, it's a little bit like don't do sloth, right? You know, it's not sloth, but it's not sloth. True story, pretty bad day. Feeling pretty Went day drinking with Kevin Hart last night, and we got after it. This is how bad it was. Got home last night, and I got home late. I got a family. Slept on the couch, in the TV room. And and then that's me being thoughtful, right? Like I'm an empathetic spouse. Like I'm gonna sleep on the couch even if she hadn't locked the bedroom door, and so she didn't. She doesn't have to do that. You know what I mean? Like, and you might be like, "How do you know it was locked?" All right, fine, you got me. I tried to get in, but like that's. I wanted my toothbrush, and then and then the reason like I'm banging and crying isn't because I want to go in there. It's because I'm disappointed that the door's locked. Anyway, she came in to the TV room this morning, and she said, "You had pizza last night?" And I said, what makes you say that? And I had a full pepperoni in my hair. The telltale sign. Poppers aren't illegal. Jackal told me this morning. Let's just say it's been a pretty good day. We had a graphic of Joe Biden growing a long ponytail talking about how he started growing hydroponic weed. Someone wrote, graphics showed potted plants and not a hydroponic system. I swear I'm not high. And based on your attention to detail, I believe you. We did jokes about last week about Mike Lindell. He did a live cast of himself shaving, and we had a lot of fun at his expense. And then someone wrote, I can't judge anyone for watching Mike Lindell shave because I watch Corrections. Spirit Airlines does not fly to Hawaii. I did not believe that, so I called up Spirit and asked a booking agent, and they said, we can get you close. First week without the band, it was very bittersweet. Also, we're realizing that just having a physical band in the studio space was sort of helping to dampen the sound of Buck's laugh. So if you ever thought, well, at least it can't get louder. Creative Arts Emmys are this weekend. Corrections is nominated, and we joke a lot about how NBC doesn't pay attention to this, know much about it. But they reached out. They were like, hey, is there anything we can do? Big night. And I said, you can send me a limo. And they were like, okay. And I was like, all right. Episode 111, Palindrome.